Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast. And now that we're all reminded of how horrific hurricanes are, let's talk about what you're supposed to do about them so that you don't get wiped out by the next one. There's also good info for people in tornado and flood areas too. So let's get after it. I'm James Merritt, Emergency Manager and Career Soldier, and this is Readiness Nation. With the devastation of Hurricanes Helene and Milton fresh in everyone's mind, now would be a good time to talk about hurricane mitigation efforts so everyone can get ready for the next one. And I understand this isn't the sexiest topic, but these mitigation techniques not only have the potential to drastically reduce the loss of life during major storms, but FEMA's internal analysis suggests that for every dollar spent on mitigative construction, as much as $8 are saved in recovery cost. And the National Institute of Building Sciences finds that it could be as high as $13 saved for every dollar spent. So this is great information to have before a hurricane so you can limit your losses, but it's critical information to have if you're repairing or rebuilding after a hurricane to help you prevent from getting wiped out again next time. To accomplish this, we're going to go over an abridged version of FEMA's IS 321 course on hurricane mitigation. The full training is available to the public at the link in the description. And if you sign up for a FEMA student ID number, which anyone can do, you can take the test over the material at the end, and if you pass, you get the certificate for the course. Furthermore, links to the FEMA reference manuals on hurricane mitigation are included in the description as well. Now, IS 321 covers three main areas to mitigate the damage of hurricanes: mitigating wind damage, mitigating flood damage, and mitigating storm surge damage. The wind damage mitigation measures are also effective for protecting against tornadoes as well. And the flood mitigation techniques will protect you from flooding from any cause. So even if you're not in a hurricane area, there's still useful information for you in this video. When mitigating wind damage, the very first thing you can do to reduce damage to your home, and thus make it safer, is make sure that your home is structurally sound and harden it where necessary. The first step in hardening your home against hurricanes is to strengthen it against the load that will be applied to it by the hurricane's winds. This is accomplished by creating a continuous load path from your roof all the way down to your foundation. This is done by attaching metal brackets and straps to studs and rafters using anchoring bolts, securing your roof to your upper walls to your lower walls to your main floor, and your main floor to your foundation. This will transfer the load the wind puts on your house into the ground. Roofs are a common failure point during a hurricane, and once the roof is breached, wind can more easily destroy the rest of the building, even if it has a continuous load path. So the next most important thing you can do to harden your house is make sure that your roof is structurally sound. Roofs come in two types: hip roofs and gable roofs. Hip roofs are sloped on all sides, thus having a lower profile and generating less wind resistance. So if you're buying a new home, building a new home, or replacing your roof, you'll be best served by a hip roof if high winds are a significant concern in your area of operations. Gable roofs are only sloped on two sides, and thus have more surface area that generates greater wind resistance. Gable roofs are prevalent and may be necessary where excessive snow buildup is a major concern. If you have a gable roof, it can be reinforced by bracing its frame. Gable bracing often consists of 2x4s placed in an X pattern at both ends of the attic. But whatever type of roof you have, it would be in your best interest to have a certified home inspector confirm that whatever material your roof is made out of is properly layered and affixed to stand up to high winds, as well as complying with all applicable building codes. Also, specifically ask if your roof was constructed with stainless steel nails if you're within 3,000 feet of salt water. Next up for hardening your home is reinforcing your breach points. And a lot of this stuff is not only effective at protecting against winds from both hurricanes and tornadoes, it's also effective at protecting against intruders as well. Exterior doors and windows are the weakest part of a structure's outer shell. If they're broken or blown in during a hurricane, high winds can enter a structure, exerting pressure on the roof and walls, resulting in serious damage, if not total destruction, as well as letting in water and debris that can further damage the building and the people inside. Your garage door is the largest potential breach point on your house. Reinforcing your garage door with metal bars and brackets will help protect the garage and its contents, as well as the entire home structure by increasing its resilience to high wind pressure. Double entry doors also pose a serious risk. Any design of double door can be secured with latches at both the top and the bottom of the door to prevent them from being blown in by high winds. Windows are the third largest, but likely most fragile breach point on your home. Windows can be hardened in 4 ways. The first way is installing impact-resistant windows made out of materials like acrylic or polycarbonate. The second way is installing ballistic film over the current existing windows. The high-end versions of these films can even make your windows bullet-resistant. The third way to harden your windows are with functional shutters. These range from wood shutters that can close over the glass windows and securely latch, all the way up to rolling metal storm shutters that lock into place. The fourth and final way to harden your windows, if a storm is coming and for whatever reason you didn't take advantage of any of the previous methods, is good old temporary plywood coverings. But if you need to resort to this method, just make sure that you use screws or lag bolts long enough to penetrate the wall studs around the window, and not just your siding or wall covering. Beyond hardening your home, there are a few other things you can do to protect your family and your home from wind damage. First up is installing a storm shelter. A storm shelter built to the standards laid out in FEMA Manual 320, Taking Shelter from the Storm, link in the description, provides near absolute protection against the risk of injury or death caused by extreme wind and flying debris. However, always remember, storm shelters do not protect against flooding, so always follow flood evacuation orders, even if you have a storm shelter. The next thing you can do is ensure that nothing on your property will turn into flying or falling debris. Trees and unattached secondary buildings pushed over or picked up by high winds can cause damage to other structures during the storm. Anchoring storage sheds or other outbuildings will help prevent them from becoming flying debris. Anchor straps like those used in manufactured homes can be used to anchor these buildings as well. Additionally, removing all trees close enough to fall on any building on your property reduces the risk of damage to your home from a falling tree, as well as from an outbuilding being crushed and turned into easily blown around debris. The distance between any building and any tree should be greater than the height of the tree when it's fully grown. Additionally, keeping trees pruned so wind can blow through the branches, instead of the branches acting like a giant sail, can help the trees stay rooted and not fall over in the first place. Now that we've hardened your home and protected you from falling and flying debris, next we need to talk about floodproofing. By definition, floodproofing describes mitigation measures that decrease the risk of flood damage to structures. Floodproofing measures are generally designed to protect individual components of a structure, not to bring the structure into compliance with a community's floodplain ordinance. And when it comes to floodproofing, there are 2 types: wet floodproofing and dry floodproofing. Wet floodproofing is any measure applied to a structure and/or its contents that prevents or reduces damage from flooding while allowing floodwaters to enter the structure. Wet proofing measures are typically used to protect the electrical, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning utility components of your house when flooding occurs. Many of these mitigation measures involve elevating equipment above the expected flood levels. Floodwater can easily damage electrical components including service panels, meters, switches, and outlets. Electrical components usually have to be replaced even if they're only inundated for a short period. Furthermore, people don't think about it when there's water everywhere, but short circuits and flooded systems pose a significant risk of setting the portion of your house that's not underwater on fire. This is why it's recommended that if you're evacuating during a hurricane, that you turn off your home's power at the breaker. FEMA has flood maps that indicate anticipated water levels called base flood elevation, or BFE. The BFE is the anticipated elevation above mean sea level that the base flood is expected to reach. The base flood is a flood that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. So check your area's BFE to identify how high you will need to elevate your components when wet floodproofing your home. You'll want to raise all components of your home's electrical system, including wiring, above the base flood elevation. But the further you raise those components above the BFE, the more you reduce your risk. FEMA strongly recommends only using licensed contractors to ensure that electrical system modifications are performed correctly and in accordance with all applicable codes. HVAC equipment such as furnaces and hot water heaters can easily be damaged or destroyed if inundated by floodwater. So a good way to protect HVAC equipment is to move it to your home's upper floor or attic instead of having it in your basement, where flooding could put them completely underwater. Your ventilation ductwork can also be protected by flooding by moving it above the BFE to the extent possible. In addition to elevating large utilities, major home appliances like washing machines and dryers can be protected by placing them on floors in your home above your BFE. Likewise, outdoor utilities like heat pumps and air conditioners can be protected by placing them on elevated platforms above your BFE. Finally, if you have external heating oil or propane tanks, you'll need to secure them by running straps over them and attaching the straps to ground anchors. These kinds of tanks can easily be moved by floodwater, and not only will losing these tanks be a major cost and inconvenience for you, but can generate a serious threat to public safety. Now, as for dry floodproofing, this, by definition, includes measures that make a structure watertight below the level that needs flood protection. This type of floodproofing is often used to protect non-residential structures, water supplies, and sewage systems. An example of a dry floodproofing measure is to apply a waterproof veneer, such as a layer of brick backed by a waterproof membrane, directly to the outside surface of an existing structure. Additionally, flooding can cause sewage from sewer lines to back up through drain pipes. These backups not only cause damage that's difficult to repair, but they also create health hazards. One way to protect against this hazard is to install backflow valves, which temporarily block drain pipes if water travels through them the wrong way. If your house's lowest level has a floor drain that empties outside, installing a floating floor drain plug can also prevent floodwater from backing up the drain pipe and entering your house. Floodwaters often carry hazardous and toxic materials, including raw sewage, animal waste, oil, gasoline, solvents, and chemicals. If your home's water supply comes from a well, floodwaters entering that well can contaminate the groundwater, making the well unsafe. Wells suspected of being contaminated should be inspected by a professional. Proper well construction will protect a well from contamination. A licensed well drilling contractor can inspect your well and suggest improvements such as extending the casing at least 2 feet above the highest known flood elevation, installing a sanitary seal or cover on the casing, and/or installing a backflow valve in the water line. The last form of floodproofing you can use is flood control barriers. These barriers include levees, berms, flood walls, and temporary barriers. Flood control barriers protect structures by deflecting the destructive force of floodwaters away from them, and thus can be used to create a protected area around your home. But remember that any of the permanent flood control barrier types will need periodic maintenance to remain effective. You also need to keep in mind that floodwater deflected away from your property may be deflected towards your neighbor's property, causing worse flooding for them, or potentially overwhelming local sewage or drainage systems. Finally, the last section of FEMA 321 talks about storm surge mitigation. This section really all breaks down to, if you live in an elevated house near the coast, it means you're in the V zone. This means you're at significant risk of damage from storm surge. As such, you need to get a certified engineer to make sure that all of the applicable safety features have been built into your home. And if they haven't, you need to get certified building professionals to bring your house up to code. So there you have it. If you harden your home against the wind and you floodproof your home against the water, you and your family are far more likely to survive the next hurricane, and your cost of repair and recovery will be drastically reduced. And that's going to be it for me. So if you found this information useful, give me the old controlled pair on the like and subscribe buttons. And if you found this information useful enough that you want to buy me a beer about it, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. And with that said, until next time, this is James Merritt for Readiness Nation, reminding you to always be the master of your fate and the captain of your soul.